I'm Paul Brownstein, a lawyer here in Bucks County, and we in our general practice handle all kinds of cases, and usually it's individuals, middle class folks, not always that they're necessarily high income parties, who have typical everyday problems in their everyday life. The survey that was done a little while ago said that the average person only sees a lawyer maybe once or twice in a lifetime, and sometimes not even that. So as a result, as I've said sometimes here before, people get a very distorted idea, if they have any at all, as to what lawyers can and can't do and what really happens in court from watching stuff on television. It's important to remember that on TV, you're seeing stuff that's being produced in California. And so a lot of the legal issues that might be relevant in those programs aren't necessarily applicable here in Pennsylvania. The second issue that's more important is you're watching the program where the sponsors want people to be happy. They want you to buy their product. That's not wrong, but at the same time, it gives also a very distorted idea of two other things. Whether the good guys really win all the time or not, as they seem to, and whether or not things happen quickly or not. And the answer is the bad guys do win a lot, and things are never as fast as you would think them to be. Not unusual for us to start a case and literally a day or two later get a phone call from a client saying, well, how's it turning out? And the answer is, it's not. Be a little patient. This is especially true in a one area law where, although I don't do heavy duty stuff, although I used to back in the 90s, I stopped then, I still take relatively low level criminal type cases. And today's topic I want to talk about in particular is one that the average person who's not a lawbreaker finds themselves involved with, even so, unfortunately with some predictability, and that's driving under the influence, called DUI. And I want to tell you a few things about that matters in how you should look after yourself should this happen to you. First and most important, getting arrested is the hard part. Once you are in the system, or as they used to say in the old days, your name is written on the police blotter. The government has all the authority and all the power. And it's a very, very slippery slide. You may remember Kojak on TV. The police are not Kojak. People catch themselves, and then they undo themselves. So a few things you need to know. If you find that you are not so drunk when you get stopped as to keep your wits, it is not a good idea to confess. And people do that. It's best to remember that all you really have to do, and all you should do, is provide basic biographical information. What's your name? Let me see your license. Where do you live? Those are things you have to do, or you will find out what the inside of a jail looks like, because they have a right to know who they're arresting and why. Don't argue with the officer. Don't protest. Don't make the officer think that you are being difficult and troublesome. They'll remember that. They're professionals. They're doing their job. They really don't have any axe to grind with you. You shouldn't do things that make them think that maybe that's how you want to be treated, and sometimes you'll be accommodated. Well, what about drunk driving, DUI? I'm going to talk today specifically about alcohol, not drugs, a different topic completely. I want to tell you, first of all, in our own practice, we get a fair number of these kind of cases, and we do them a lot. When it gets to be a very complicated case, a very high-powered kind of case, even though I've been there in my career, I tend to refer that kind of case to a colleague of mine who's a professional and expert and does only criminal law all the time. So if a client comes to me, and I legitimately believe it's the kind of thing that another lawyer is a better one to be able to do it, I have no concern whatsoever about forwarding that to a colleague where the client will be treated right. As recently as last week, I had a fellow with a drunk driving in this jurisdiction in Pennsylvania, and also happened to have one in New Jersey. My colleague did a wonderful job in New Jersey with very good outcomes for my client now here in Pennsylvania. Remembering that New Jersey and Pennsylvania have reciprocity. That means what happens in Jersey doesn't stay in Jersey, unlike the TV and movies. Pennsylvania and New Jersey communicate with each other. If you do a DUI there, PennDOT here is going to know about it and act on it, and will mete out similar punishment. So we're talking about punishment, DUI, not fun. Here's what happens. The first you're going to know, if you weren't so intoxicated you don't remember it at all, is being stopped and likely being asked to pass a field sobriety test. That's the stuff we all know about. Walk a straight line, touch your nose, touch your eye, show that you're balanced. And pretty much typically in the police report, the charge report, it's going to say much the same thing. Glassy eyes, slurred speech, strong aroma alcohol, unsteady pace or gait. And that is how you get initially stopped and held for a drunk driving car charge. They will transport you to a hospital, even though there's a breathalyzer, to have blood taken. And the blood tells the tale. You cannot refuse a blood test in Pennsylvania unless the officer tells you there's consequences of some dimension, that if you don't take it, there will be consequences, criminal consequences. And since a very important case recently came down that made that clear, sometimes that didn't happen that way. Now it does. But if you do not legitimately get told what you have to do and you refuse the blood test, you will be marked down as having refused. A refusal is anything but yes. You can't even say, oh, I'll do it, but first let me talk to my lawyer. Sounds sensible. Them's not the rules. Anything but yes is a no. And a no, if nothing else, will get you a long-term suspension of your license, even if ultimately you're not guilty of drunk driving. Cooperate. It can't help you, but it will harm you if you don't cooperate. When I say it can't help you, I mean sometimes it can't help you, obviously. All right. So what does Pennsylvania do? They take the blood. There will be a breathalyzer or a blood test. It'll give the amount. And you'll then be booked. You'll appear before a district magistrate, usually get charged. You may or may not get the ticket right away. It'll come in the mail. Do not ever, as a lawyer talking now, plead guilty to a DUI charge. Even if you say, gee, I'm guilty, I did it. What's the point of fighting? Because once you plead guilty, the case is over. You have nothing more you can do. Whereas in very many cases, there's a lot that can be done. I'll give you one example, and it's the important one. Pennsylvania allows what's called ARD, letters for Accelerated Rehabilitation Disposition. ARD is a special kind of break that Pennsylvania allows for first-time, non-violent offenders. So if you have a drunk driving charge, and it's the first time you've ever had it, never been guilty of a crime of some kind before, even though it's a bad alcohol content, you may very well qualify for this ARD. What's ARD? It gives you a chance to plead not guilty or guilty. You plead, I want ARD. And if you qualify for the program, which is, I should hasten to add, discretionary to the district attorney, not the police, not PennDOT, not the judge, the district attorney. If police or judge or PennDOT saying something, you have to depend upon the fact that the district attorney could always say no if they want to. They may or may not be allowed to under the rules, but they don't have to give you an ARD. If you qualify, however, you'll get a probation. The probation can be anywhere from 60 months to a year, quite commonly. And if you don't get into further trouble, legal trouble, criminal trouble, not parking tickets, but kind of trouble that the police get involved with, if you don't do that during the period of probation, at the end of the probationary period, the court will expunge the record. It'll wipe it out like it never was. And they notify all reporting authorities like the district attorney, the FBI, the state police, all those people get notified. And when that happens, you're free to go. You get one ARD. You don't get to do this again next year. You don't get to do this 5 years from now. It's important to keep in mind that the ARD is a privilege, but to qualify for the privilege, there are other things you have to do. You have to pay the fines, which are at least $1,000 usually for drunk driving. You have to normally do community service and show that you did it. And you have to go to driver's school, which is something that is necessary and not a lot of fun. If you don't do all those things, you will not qualify for ARD. They won't give it to you. And if you do all those things, in Bucks County at least, before you come to your hearing to get the ARD, which ultimately has to happen, if you do all that stuff, you'll be qualified. But if you haven't done it, then you're not going to get into ARD. And so you need to do the part you have to do, and they're not that difficult. But again, it's for first-time offenders. All right, so let's say that you've got the ARD, and that was 6 months ago. It was In the meantime, what's happened? Well, when you get the ARD, your license gets suspended. It could be a month, it could be 3 months, it could be longer. How long your license is suspended has, again, nothing to do with the police or the district attorney or the judge. That's the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. They have rules. It's a bureaucracy. When you have a certain offense, PennDOT, as a bureaucratic matter, assigns the suspension. You get a notice in the mail. Once they know you've been convicted, or even got ARD, they'll be told that, you now have this suspension. While you are suspended, you're not supposed to drive. Everybody knows that. And a lot of times people have needs to drive. In this talk, I'm not going to dwell on how you might get around having a right to drive under limited circumstances, as, for example, if you needed to work. There may be ways of doing that in some cases. But in the average case where you can't or haven't done that, while you are suspended, you may not drive. And what happens to you if you do drive and you get caught at it, the ARD will be revoked. Your second offense will be an automatic second offense. You will go to jail, as you might have done the first time. And your license will be suspended more, and you might even be revoked. And you'll pay an even bigger fine. And there is now, particularly in third offense cases, which is brand new in Pennsylvania, third offense DUI is now a felony. Wasn't that before very recently. And it's a minimum 6 months in jail, which is more than often the actual original sales sentence might have been for DUI. What am I really telling you here? Well, when you have a DUI charge, don't feel guilty, feel bad, go to court, plead guilty because you're wrong, pay your fine and say, good, I did the right citizen thing. That's what your parade is, to do that. But you oughtn't to do that because a qualified, experienced attorney can very often, in a case like this, get you a better deal. And you want a better deal if you can possibly get it, because it's hard enough as it is. What else is important to tell you? You don't know how to do that. Unless you're extraordinarily unusual, you will have much to learn and not enough time to learn it to get the kind of breaks that a good attorney, an experienced attorney, might get for you. Like most things that are legally complicated, or can be, don't do them yourself. I mean, it's almost as if you were to tell a doctor, well, I can take my own appendix out, I read about it. Or I can do this and that myself. For my part, I'm an attorney. I'm not a business contractor. I know nothing about air conditioning HVAC systems. I know zero about that. I wouldn't begin to think I'd put in my own electrical system in my house. I wouldn't try to put in my own HVAC. I would get somebody that does it. And although there's a cost to do things like that, it's way better than the kind of cost you will bear if you don't. Because, it doesn't sound very nice, but I'll tell you the truth. Doctors, in their own way, have a better shot at helping people this way than lawyers do. Because when you are sick, medically ill, it hurts you. You don't feel good. You'll want to go see a doctor to get better. You may try a little while for yourself, but you know better than to do that. But when you're legally in bad shape, oftentimes you don't feel anything. And it's only words, after all. I'm talking here now. And people think, well, I can do that. I can look it up. I can read it. And even as an experienced lawyer, in any kind of case, things are overlooked, things are complicated, things are technical. Keep this in mind. When you get involved in legal trouble, it's only your life, your freedom, your property. When it really matters, the choice is simple. When it really matters, the choice is simple.